Hey, everybody. Welcome back to What Would You Change movie podcast. We are the Super Monkey Fighters. I am Loki, here again with Monkey Feathers and Papa Nugget. How you guys doing?
Good.
Acceptable.
Right now we're going to go through How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. So, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days is a 2003 romantic comedy. It is the story of Benjamin Barry, who is an advertising executive and a ladies' man who wins a big campaign but bets that he has to make a woman fall in love with him in 10 days, which is only half the story because she does the same thing and they fall in love and everything's great and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. It was directed by Donald Petrie, written by Michele Alexander, Jeannie Long, apparently a book, Kristen Buckley, Brian Regan, and Burr Steers. It stars Kate Hudson as Andy, Matthew McConaughey as Ben, Kathryn Hahn as Michele, Annie Parisse as Jeannie, Adam Goldberg as Tony, Thomas Lennon as Thayer. I don't know why I'm reading character names. None of the character names really stand out or do anything. Also notable characters in it are Robert Klein is the boss, is Matthew McConaughey's boss, and Bebe Neuwirth is Kate Hudson's boss. Yeah, I don't have much to say about this movie. I
think we should preface this. I did not choose this movie. I don't know if people were going to think that I chose this movie.
Allegedly, I chose this movie, but I don't remember doing that.
And it's funny because you thought, man, we should do How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I think you prefaced it as like, I haven't seen it, we should do it. And
I've seen it before.
Oh, okay. But you prefaced it as it would be a good movie for around Valentine's Day.
It was Valentine's Day, and we were.
I want to preface this that I didn't choose this movie if people are going to think that I chose this movie.
I will throw myself on this grenade as being the one who chose this movie because of my love for Matthew McConaughey and everything that he has done.
All right.
And to be fair, like Kate Hudson and so getting into the things that we liked, Kate Hudson and Matthew McConaughey, they do what they should do, and this movie does exactly what it sets out to do. Like, there's no glaring technical issues. It is exactly what it is, and it doesn't pretend to be anything else.
And when you say technical issues, do you mean like their chemistry or like, because you were talking about a relationship and then you said no technical issues.
No technical issues, but the actors don't flub their lines. They're believable in their roles. Everything fits what they wanted it to be. It wasn't
fits nicely in the box it should.
Yes, it doesn't do anything new or revolutionary, but it doesn't break anything. It's not like the dialogue is poorly delivered or, like I said, it fits into the box that it's supposed to fit into, and it does what it's supposed to do. What it's supposed to do, I think, is boring and uninteresting and cliched, but it does it well. So, and the moments when they're acting more genuine, because they're both kind of playing parts within the movie. Like, they're both trying to convince the other person that something's different, right? So she's being over the top, ridiculous and crazy.
Yeah,
those seem over the top, ridiculous and crazy. But the moments when they're genuinely the characters are falling in love, those are believable. Those are fairly well acted. So I did like those kinds of things.
I find this movie entertaining. I don't look at it as the greatest movie in the world because, it's not. But there were some entertaining parts with the comedy a little bit, like the scene where they go to couples therapy and it's in the woman's apartment. And you can see just as Andy knocks on the door and her friend opens the door, it was just, to me, I found it entertaining just to see situations of surprise that these characters are getting into, like the Celine Dion concert where Benjamin thinks that he's going to the Knicks games and it's front row seats. And then in reality, he's going to a Celine Dion concert and he didn't realize it. So I did find a lot of the comedic parts actually entertaining. Some of them I felt were kind of cringeworthy, Like the scene at poker night and she's going over the top crazy and she's she's trying to get him to break up with her so that she can be done with all of this. So some of the things like that I did feel over the top, but other parts I did find a little comedic. But one of the things that I actually really did like was the family scenes where he takes her up to see his family and it's the weekend and things like that. I felt the family connection was really genuine and really heartfelt because they were not being their over the top characters. They were being themselves. And that was something that I liked, that whole weekend getaway scenes because it felt very genuine and very authentic.
And that would be an easy place for the movie to fall apart if they didn't handle that well. Like, we have all the shenanigans leading up to it, right? And that's the point in time in which, like the real relationship starts to form a little more, right? It's been starting throughout the shenanigans a little bit here and there, but like that's kind of where it all kind of more or less comes together. And if they completely dropped that scene or did it not as well as they did, poorly.
Yeah, that could easily have been a scene where they weren't real people; they were more over the top, ridiculous for the comedic effect. And I think it would have just completely fallen apart there. Where that's really the kind of the anchor to them coming together, because up until that point, they haven't really made a connection other than their initial meeting. They've both just been trying to kind of con each other into whatever their goals are, and so
right, they have competing goals which keep them together.
Yeah, that scene was really good, especially the farting uncle. I think I would have made the entire movie about him. or cut him entirely, because he kind of is that over the top part of that scene, right, where he's just like, oh, also there's an uncle here who farts randomly, and that's it. Like, there's nothing more to it. But the rest of the family, I think, is fantastic. So yeah, I struggle to find something else I like with this movie. I actually was having some fairly visceral, like, fight or flight reactions that was very strange, where there were scenes that would happen or characters would act and do something, and I would just like twist on the couch and I wanted to leave. Like, I had to physically force myself to stay, just because there are some things that they're not. I guess maybe at this point in time, let's transition more into the dislikes, because that's probably a much longer conversation for us.
Well, I will have to say that with these choice of movies this week, my wife was much more excited in watching them than previous weeks.
Yeah. And maybe we should have also prefaced this with, these movies are the same equivalent of cheesy action movies from the 80s and 90s, right? If you're into that sort of thing, you're into that sort of thing. So, in the same level that there are movies we enjoy for the nostalgia's sake that we've gone through, or we love them because they're bad, these are the equivalent of those for other people. I'm sure somebody out there, this is their favorite movie and they absolutely love it and they love everything about it, and it's the ridiculous over the top situations that work for them, but it's just not my cup of tea. So kind of transitioning that into the what we didn't like. The thing that we talk about a lot with character, if you believe the characters, if you connect with the characters, it's going to be a good movie no matter what happens. Even if it's a little boring, you make some connection. And we talk about how sometimes characters are less characters and they're more caricatures. I don't even think that these are caricatures. I think these are vague ideas of what people maybe imagine they want in life. The things that work for me in more romantic comedies are the believable situations in people, where it's hard for me to understand, which is strange because Matthew McConaughey is an advertising executive and I've worked in advertising. Like, it was hard for me to connect with them as people because nothing about them felt real at all. There wasn't any
real depth to them. Like, none of that was really established. The only real depth that started was that scene at home. Like, it started to go down there, but then it didn't really transition.
And you see them throughout their daily lives, and they don't feel like they're real people. They feel like a commercial. Like, this is the commercial rendition of what a person would be. Like, you know, they've got the big city job with no worries. Their apartments feel staged.
Right,
they don't feel like anybody actually lives there. And it's tough for me to care about a character and then by the time you get around to the scene that they start to kind of build some of those emotions, like I've already checked out. Even as far as these people like trying to kind of manipulate each other, or the people who are making the bets to manipulate, they're more plot devices than they are characters. So I found that really tough. I just didn't click with these guys. And even the friends, like I had forgot that it was Adam Goldberg and Thomas Lennon who were kind of the cohorts of Matthew McConaughey. And I was really surprised that they didn't utilize those two to better effect.
It was just filler.
They're just, yeah. And it's like, you've got these two amazing actors and comedians who can be really hilarious and over the top and bring that level of comedy. It's like they were just there so that when Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson weren't together, they could be talking to someone else.
And the only real thing that they did was to help push Matthew McConaughey to get back with Addie.
Yeah,
and they broke up.
Yeah,
and
they broke
up. The
one
poker scene.
Which is also weird.
And then they were also the ones that spilled the beans to Andy that it was all a con.
Yeah.
And that he was just basically using her to get ahead.
Yeah. Which was a better way of revealing that side of the con than the other side where her boss, he introduces himself effectively as her boyfriend, and then she's like, just so you know, and then realizes halfway through that she spilled the beans about how she's being, and it's just like, that was the worst way of revealing that ever. I think there was a lot more potential here than what actually made it out, because there was more focus on the big names at the time rather than the better performers or the characters who had more potential to be that over the top thing. Also weird to see. It's a weird time period in movies where it seems modern, but it's not, because it came out in 2003. So, you know, she's got a Nokia cell phone and they've still got CD players. So that feels weird. And this, I don't know why this bugs me. It probably, I mean, I do know it's unrealistic. Matthew McConaughey's apartment and his TV setup is completely unrealistic. He's got a couch set up that looks at a blank wall that has speakers and a CD player, and then his TV's on a swivel that goes between the kitchen and the living. And you're just like, no, that's not how a bachelor would set. Like, the TV would be big, especially a sports fan. The TV would be big, front and center, right in the, you know.
But he has a basketball.
You can sit on the couch and do the, like, it doesn't sit right in my head. Like, I get the target audience for this. I get that I'm not the target audience for this.
You know, I'll agree with your assessment about the characters not having depth. I did feel that this movie was kind of shallow in the way that it handled both men and women. Like the scene where he's in his office and he takes off his shirt and you have the three female coworkers who are just watching him, as well as the scene where he's in the bar and he's getting his target picked out, the woman who he's going to get to fall in love with him. And the way that women were effectively turned down, I felt that was really shallow in the way that that was handled. Because, in my opinion, in movies a lot like this, I think that people deserve better in how they're treated, both men and women.
Well, and yeah, because they kind of did the flip side with Kate Hudson, where she's eating a big hamburger and she gets to be the goofy guy character from 10 years before. And you know, they just kind of flip that a little bit around where it's.
Well, and it's the statements that they were making before the whole How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days article was going to be written, where her friend said, yeah, you can do everything that I was doing and guys will still come after you. And it's the idea that it's the different standards of what beautiful or pretty is. And this is 20 years old almost 20 years old, but this is, you know, several years old. And it's the standards of what is pretty, what is good looking and handsome and things like that. And it felt very stereotypical and very shallow because of that. Yeah, because you have Matthew McConaughey's character, who's very much like he's into sports and he's very muscular and he's very handsome. And then you have Kate Hudson's character, who's very much the stereotypical beautiful woman in a movie. And because of that, I agree with the assessment that it's shallow. There's no depth to these characters, and you can't gain.
Even I was gonna say, even when they try to add some depth to them, like Kate Hudson, I want to be a writer and I want to write about important things. She doesn't actually talk about any real issues. She just says politics, and it's like, I want to talk about the politics. You're like,
it
specifics.
It skates the in-depth details.
Yeah.
You don't get a whole lot of behind the scenes of what these people are like. And there's just no background to these characters besides Benjamin's character when you get to see his family. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot. And even then, it's a small little part of the movie. So that's one of the two things is I felt it very shallow and stereotypical, because you should make us want to care about this relationship besides just throwing us into it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like throughout the entire movie, they do try and pit women versus men, because you have the Judys that are going against Matthew McConaughey and his little posse, right?
Yeah, and even then, like, what does he call them? The lips and hips? One of them's lips, one of them's hips, or something like that. Yeah,
again, shallow.
It's very, very shallow. So I think the movie is littered, kind of with all of those just very, very shallow things that don't really go anywhere. And that's kind of how the entire movie feels. And then they go through the kind of traditional arc where at the end it's like, oh, now we're supposed to feel for them because like they realize they actually love each other and all that. But it kind of falls flat for me because it's like, okay, like how aside from that one shot with going to his family, like what else is really developed other than that?
Yeah,
like we don't see anything, so it's hard to really have an emotional connection to their relationship.
It's hard to see anything because throughout the whole sequences, it's just them being over the top, trying to win their bets, so to speak.
Yep.
And as you had said, Loki, you only get the first initial date where they're eating in the restaurant and they're deciding like, yeah, sure, we'll go out and we'll do this.
Yeah, and that's shallow because that's just a spark of interest. Like that's the thing that would start the growth, but nothing happens after. Like everything in between that is you both should run screaming from each other, which is the premise of the movie. I get that, but because
there's no actual connection of them as people and not them as characters, it is hard to just say like, yeah, they're falling in love.
It feels very 90s sitcom-ish scenarios with a lot of them. It's the man versus woman that was the big thing. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. You see that in most of the 90s TV shows where the parents, the mom and dad of the families are always kind of at odds because of those gender roles. And so maybe looking at it through the lens of the past has kind of changed that with how the world has evolved. Society has evolved. It just feels out of place. Kind of pushing back on those kinds of things where especially these days is just kind of cliche with all those kinds of things. So, and that's the thing, like there should have been parts that I would have liked, like, to transition more into things that we would change. I kind of said it earlier. I would have used Adam Goldberg and Thomas Lennon more. If you don't know who Thomas Lennon is, he is the chief in Reno 911. He's a comedian who's amazingly hilarious, who kind of has no boundaries with those kinds of things. And I think that's a real missed opportunity, especially with him, to do something more outlandish than just like, oh, he's the he's the weird friend, right? He wears a bow tie and plaid and pastel colors because his wife and whatever. But then you don't even realize that he has a wife until it's relevant to them to say, oh, I've got a marriage counselor, right? So I would have changed those kinds of things. And I would have, like, the family scenes, we all enjoyed those ones. I think if the movie were more kind of centered around those kinds of things, it would have been a lot more interesting.
I would put more depth into the characters and actually build up the relationship more than just the initial date and then the family scene. Because if I don't know exactly how it would have worked, and maybe they did try and work it in the script to figure it out, and it just wasn't playing out. But I would have the crazy over the top acting of these characters, and then maybe have subtle sparks of their real personalities seep through to where you actually have connections of, because even with the two friends of Matthew McConaughey, and they were saying, well, maybe she's bipolar and things like that. Well, if that's the case, maybe actually have, I'm not saying that she should be bipolar, but what I'm saying is, is actually have moments of the real Andy seep through to where he connects with the real Andy and not the crazy over the top Andy, to where then you can actually believe that this is a relationship that's building. Because throughout the whole thing, he's believing that she's crazy and he wants to break up with her, but he wants to win the bet. And I wish that there was more depth to these characters. And we talked about maybe centering the movie around the family part of it. Build more, because you don't actually see Andy's family, you just see her friends. Mm-hmm. And I think her friends would essentially have been her family in this movie, but build a better relationship with her friends instead of just the beginning part where she goes to Kathryn Hahn's place. I can't remember her character's name, but she goes to her friend's place and helps her clean herself up and then go to the work meeting. Build a better relationship on that side, and then actually have connection.
They wouldn't have had the whole story if that didn't happen. Like,
well, and
they kind of split.
They kind of split that between her two friends, because like her other friend is there for a lot of the beginning, and then not at the end. Like after they've had their heartbreak, and she's there with Kathryn Hahn, not with the other friend. Like the other friend's just gone off doing anything. Like wait a minute, this isn't the group, the community that she had that you'd shown. Well, to be fair, they do the same thing with Matthew McConaughey's friends as they do with her friends. Like they're just there when it's convenient for the story. Yeah. And that's about it.
Yeah. But if you built the story more around family, you already have Matthew McConaughey's family that's showcased. And if you don't want to show Andy's character, Kate Hudson's, you could just use her friends as essentially her family and then build them up the same way. You would still have the story and everything around it, but then you would just have genuine interactions between these two groups of people instead of just the throwaway, shallow stereotype that this movie became. So I would want to change and make it more meaningful and more impactful by having these characters actually have depth.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of kind of bouncing back and forth between kind of more real moments throughout the storyline within their relationship, and then cutting that off with the crazy moments and kind of creating that tension where they're kind of being pulled back and forth. I think that's a really good idea, and I think they could have. I think they kind of do it a little bit, but not to the effect that it's very noticeable or causes the tension that I think would strengthen the show. So I do like that idea. It's hard though, because I mean, I feel like so much time is put into the shenanigans that, like, how long is the movie gonna be if you try and
that's why you just find the balance.
Yeah.
You find the balance. You cut a little bit of the shenanigans out and add more depth to these characters behind the scenes, so to speak.
Well, I think you pushed it more to the extremes, because some of the shenanigans to me didn't even have depth, right? They were forced. They were just as shallow as all the other moments as well. And so if you push those more to bigger extreme gags like other comedies of the time,
and I think it would help
the realistic moments that way as well.
Yeah, I think it would help if they showed more thought put into the shenanigans, because it almost seems like she's just like, okay, I need to do something, so I'm gonna get all crazy and just do something. But like, if it showed her like actually kind of like pre-planning what she was gonna do, or like kind of setting up a scenario. I think that would maybe be a little more interesting than just like, oh, yep, she's going crazy on the spot.
She has a map like Home Alone. She draws out her plan in crayon. And, I could see that making it a bit more interesting as well with.
And then maybe her plan doesn't quite go the way she planned, and then she has to recover and add a little more attention.
Yeah, because they both feel like they're just winging it as they go along. Like even Matthew McConaughey, when they first meet, he's lighting candles, he's putting on the music, and he stops and goes, "Wait a minute, this is one night stand. I need a relationship, so I got to go." And, he's blowing the candles out. He changes the music so that it's not, it's not a one night stand kind of a thing. Like he had no plan going into it. It was just straight, I can do this because I'm me. And
he was kind of just thrown into it too.
Yeah. So
I mean, I can understand that scene. Yeah. But from that point on.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, from that point on, they don't ever have a plan after that. Like even he doesn't have he's like, well, I'm just going to be myself and that'll work out.
Yeah.
Like, and she's just like, well, I'm going to just be crazy, but I'm not going to plan these things out. You're not going to see the plan come out. You just see her show up with like plants and stuffed animals and things. So yeah, we'll leave it there, and I will end it with an apology if you love this movie. I know there are people out there who absolutely love this movie, but
they should leave comments of everything we missed.
Yes, leave comments down below, but also remember, in the same way that Requiem for a Dream is a movie that probably gives you a visceral reaction, is the same way this does to me. So it's the opposite for me. So. And we'll leave you there. So leave comments. Let us know your thoughts on How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, and tell us what we should watch next. We'll catch you in the next one. Adios.
See ya.